खटल खटल चाहिए। जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदनंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर वनचारी यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर सतश्री श्रीमद ऐसी भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। नामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की जय। श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की जय। श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय। मायापुर धाम की जय। जगन्नाथपुरी की जय। गंगा माई की जय। जमुना माई की जय। तुलसी महारानी की जय। भक्ति देवी की जय। Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita, written by His Holiness Satsvarup Das Goswami. We're on volume 4. London, a Dream Fulfilled. Srila Prabhupada had just asked Shyam Sundar to ask George Harrison to pay for the printing of the first volume of the Krishna book. Srila Prabhupada for the last 2 years had been doing a summary translation of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam while he was at his world headquarters in Los Angeles. And now he was ready to print the book with Dai Nippon in Japan. But the book was going to cost $19,000 US, and Prabhupada didn't have the money. So since Prabhupada was in London at the time, he asked Shyam Sundar if George Harrison would like to pay for the printing of the book. At first, George was somewhat insulted in the sense that Shyam Sundar had never asked him for anything before, and Shyam Sundar he made sure not to ask him for anything because George said that every day people were coming and asking him for money. But Prabhupada then spoke to him, and he agreed. Now George is speaking about that. George, I didn't really think I was qualified. Oh, Prabhupada then asked him, when he agreed to print the book, he asked him to write the foreword for the book. And George, being a new devotee, not initiated, having just recently met the devotees, he didn't feel he was actually qualified. I didn't really think I was qualified to write the foreword to Prabhupada's book. But one way of looking at it is, because I am known, it would help. But from the other point of view, it could really hinder, because not everyone wants to listen or to believe what I say. There are a lot of people who would be put off just because I'm saying it. I mean, if I picked up a book on Krishna and the foreword was written by Frank Zappa or somebody like that, I would think, God, maybe I don't want to know about it. So this is a picture of George Harrison playing his guitar with another musician, poet, composer named Frank Zappa. Now, most of you don't know who Frank Zappa is, but he was a contemporary to the Beatles, and he was very outspoken in his music, to say the least. And he was very much against censorship of musicians and artists. He felt that they should be able to express themselves to the public. But the thing was that some of his songs were so outlandish that because they were all in the same contemporary music scene, we happened to, while we were traveling with the Grateful Dead and other musicians as devotees, we would come and we would feed them prasadam. We would feed them their dinners before they had their big programs, their concerts all over America. There was a group of us who would travel with these musicians. And on one of the gigs, one of the music concerts, Frank Zappa happened to be there. So we brought him prasadam also. But his music was not at all like the Beatles' music. The Beatles' music was about emotions. There was something philosophical, some mention of God, definitely, towards the latter part of their songs, Hare Krishna and Hallelujah, and so many different names of Krishna that they would incorporate into their songs. But Frank Zappa wasn't like that. Some of his songs were obscene. One of his biggest hits was called Tickle My Fancy. It was just terrible. So they had although they were musicians, although they were contemporaries, although they were both very famous, they had very different mindsets. So George was expressing to himself that, yes, Prabhupada wants me to write this foreword, and it might help because I'm well known, but maybe some people don't like me, and some people don't like what I have to say. And then he was just reflecting that, oh no, what if Frank Zappa wrote the foreword to this book? Would I want to read it? So he was comparing himself to Frank Zappa, but George was a very different type of a person. He was very much connected to Krishna and to Srila Prabhupada and to the devotees. So I've put here, because this foreword sold millions of books. We just had to show George Harrison's name in the book, and people would immediately buy it. That's how popular he was. Everybody is looking for Krishna. Some don't realize that they are, but they are. Krishna is God, the source of all that exists, the cause of all that is, was, or ever will be. As God is unlimited, he has many names, Allah, Buddha, Jehovah, Ram. All are Krishna, all are one. This is pretty good for someone who hasn't taken his vows to Prabhupada. He understood the philosophy. God is not abstract. He has both the impersonal and the personal aspects to his personality, which is supreme, eternal, blissful, and full of knowledge. As a single drop of water has the same qualities as an ocean of water, so has our consciousness the qualities of God's consciousness. But through our identification and attachment with material energy, physical body, sense pleasures, material possessions, ego, etc., our true transcendental consciousness has been polluted. And like a dirty mirror, it is unable to reflect a pure image. With many lives, our association with the temporary has grown. This impermanent body, a bag of bones and flesh, is mistaken for our true self, and we have accepted this temporary condition to be final. Through all ages, great saints have remained as living proof that this non-temporary, permanent state of God consciousness can be revived in all living souls. Each soul is potentially divine. Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita, steady in the self, being freed from all material contamination, the yogi achieves the highest perfectional stage of happiness in touch with the Supreme Consciousness. Chapter 6, verse 28. Yoga, a scientific method for God or self-realization, is the process by which we purify our consciousness, stop further pollution, and arrive at the state of perfection, full knowledge, full bliss. If there's a God, I want to see him. It's pointless to believe in something without proof. And Krishna consciousness and meditation are methods where you can actually obtain God perception. You can actually see God and hear him, play with him. It might sound crazy, but he is actually there, actually with you. There are many yogic paths, Raja, Jnana, Hatha, Kriya, Karma, Bhakti, which are all acclaimed by the masters of each method. Swami Bhaktivedanta is, as his title says, a bhakti yogi, following the path of devotion. By serving God through each thought, word, and deed, and by chanting his holy names, the devotee quickly develops God consciousness by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. One inevitably arrives at Krishna consciousness. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. I request that you take advantage of this book, Krishna, and enter into its understanding. I also request that you make an appointment to meet your God now. Through the self-liberating process of yoga, union, and give peace a chance. All you need is love, Krishna. Haribol, George Harrison, March 31st, 1970. So Srila Prabhupada had already left London by that time. He left the third week of December to go back to America, to Boston, because he had been since September, he had been with the devotees from September to December, helping them to establish the London temple. So this was written and then printed a few months after that, after Prabhupada had left. Now, George goes on. So I thought that although he asked me, maybe Prabhupada didn't really want me to write the foreword, but it was one of those things I couldn't get out of. Everybody had their minds made up. You're writing the foreword, and that's it. So I just did it. And he did a beautiful job of explaining the philosophy simply. Here we are again. This is when Prabhupada was still in London. When Srila Prabhupada asked to watch the moon landing, the devotees rented a television and placed it in Prabhupada's living room. Prabhupada took his massage as usual, sitting in a chair before the television. So we can just imagine this. They rented a television, put it in Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada had a very fixed schedule. So he would take his massage before his lunch prasadam. And after his massage, he would take a bath, then he would dress, and then he would take prasadam. So this would be about 11 o'clock in the morning when Prabhupada would be sitting in his living room. Dhananjaya was giving him massage. Purushottam announced, "Well, Prabhupada, it's about time, so I'll turn on the television, and soon we'll be getting some pictures from the astronauts out in space." A reporter was speaking from Cape Canaveral, Florida. Cape Canaveral Florida is down in the southern portion of America, and that's where NASA, the National Aeronautics Space Agency, has their big center. And that's where they have all of the rockets take off from, at Cape Canaveral. We're just about to get the first pictures of this historic occasion. The picture appeared fuzzy, then cleared. The spacecraft had landed on the moon. As the astronauts emerged from the ship, they slowly eased themselves down onto the moon's surface. Purushottam was in ecstasy. So we can remember that there was this ongoing conversation between Prabhupada and Purushottam. Purushottam was so proud as an American that the Americans had won the space race. They had gotten to the moon first, and they put the American flag on the moon, which meant that somehow or other America owned the moon now. And Purushottam fully believed that the astronauts had actually reached the moon. And Prabhupada, by Vedic evidence, proved again and again that it was impossible for the Americans with their earthly bodies to ever reach the moon, which was a heavenly body. The earthly bodies can't exist on heavenly planets. So there was a little lack of faith that had developed between Purushottam and what Prabhupada was saying. Dhananjaya. I was attempting to massage Prabhupada's head and at the same time watch the program. All of a sudden, as the men were landing, Prabhupada motioned for me to sit in front of him. So I came around. As soon as I sat down, Prabhupada started to massage my head. I was quite embarrassed. "You have forgotten how to massage properly?" he asked. "This is how you do it." He massaged my head for about 2 minutes. So Dhananjaya had been so much absorbed in watching the moon landing that he wasn't concentrating on the massage. So Prabhupada turned it around. He massaged Dhananjaya's head. Then I stood behind Prabhupada and again began massaging his head. By this time, the astronauts were moving across the landscape. They had gotten out their little American flag and were sticking it in the ground and were jumping up and down. Apparently, they were defying gravity because every time they jumped up, they would float through the air and then gently land again. There was a lot of jubilation and sounds from them. "So Purushottam," Prabhupada asked, "they have come to the moon?" "Yes, Prabhupada," Purushottam said excitingly. "They've landed on the moon." Prabhupada smiled. Dhananjaya. Again, Prabhupada motioned me to the front. I moved around and sat down. I thought he wanted me to massage him from the front, but again, he put his hands on my head and massaged. He said, "Can't you learn this simple thing, massaging my head?" I had been watching the television and not giving my full attention to my service. I tried again, but again Prabhupada said, "You still don't know how to do this." I said, "Well, Prabhupada, I'm trying my hardest." He laughed and said, "That's all right, continue." So this picture is not the massage picture. It's not that a photographer was always standing there with Prabhupada ready to take pictures. This picture is when you can see the beautiful redwood planks when the temple was completed, and Prabhupada is giving Dhananjaya here. This is Dhananjaya. Second initiation, putting the thread on him. It was the closest I could get to Prabhupada massaging Dhananjaya's head. Prabhupada asked Purushottam, "So what can you see?" "They're exploring the moon's surface," he said. "So what is there?" "Well, it looks like they have landed inside a crater somewhere, and the ground is sandy with some rocks." "Oh, look, they're showing some shadows from some of the rocks that are lying around." You can see the shadows there on the rocks. "That's all you can see? There are no people, there are no trees, there are no rivers, there are no buildings?" "No," Purushottam replied, "the moon is barren." "They have not landed on the moon," Prabhupada said emphatically. "This is not the moon." Later, when Malati brought in Prabhupada's lunch, he said, "What Malati has done, she has made this little khichdi for Krishna, and that is far greater than what they have done." So Prabhupada is putting perspective on the moon landing. A little bit of devotion, a little bit of offering of khichdi to Krishna is better than the farce of landing on the moon. Even though Prabhupada's quarters were incomplete and temple renovation made Seven-Berry Place noisy and hectic, Prabhupada decided to move in. "I'm not attached to a comfortable apartment," he said. "My attachment is to living in the association of devotees." He was moving into the temple at a time when record sales were low and the devotees were having to purchase supplies piecemeal whenever they got money. Yet, with Prabhupada living with them and supervising their work, they were satisfied. So Srila Prabhupada would often do this. There are two examples that come to mind. When we were having the construction here at Vrindavan, the temple was under construction, of course. The guest house was just a big hole in the ground. There was no guest house at all. And Prabhupada's house, there were about 4 rooms that were ready. And as you might know here, when they make the roof to the flat buildings here, they take bricks and they take the bricks up on top of the roof and they start smashing the bricks into little pieces that will cause a little bit of insulation on the roof so that when the rain comes and when the heat comes, after they put the cement, it's not so hot. So Prabhupada whenever Prabhupada would come to Vrindavan during the construction, he would stay at the Radha Damodar temple in his rooms, or he would stay with an member of parliament, Mr. Seth Bishanchan, who lives where our Kirtan ashram, that whole Kirtan ashram and the bhakti-yoga ashram behind, that was Seth Bishanchan's ashram and home. So Prabhupada would stay there. But Prabhupada wasn't comfortable there because Seth Bishanchan was a devout devotee of Lord Shiva. And he would worship Lord Shiva in very extraordinary manners. So Prabhupada did not like staying there. So he would come and he would stay in the little the mud huts where the devotees were staying. And finally, he just decided one day, I'm moving into my rooms, even while all the banging was going on the roof. Then again, when Prabhupada in 1977 had gone to London, because although he couldn't even sit up by himself, he had to be taken in the car horizontally. He went to London, but his health deteriorated very quickly in London. So he came back to Bombay. And in Bombay, Prabhupada had quarters in one of the tenants' apartments that they had made for Prabhupada. It was one of the apartments, and the next door was the BBT. But Prabhupada, because they were building the two towers and the Radha Rasa Bihari temple, he said, I'm moving into my quarters. And while the construction was going on, and we know how noisy construction can be, we have our KBCC going on right now, day and night, 24 hours. Prabhupada moved into his quarters there before anything was ready. So again, now Prabhupada, he realized after a little bit of association with John Lennon and his wife that the devotees did not belong in John Lennon's estate. So he was determined he's going to move into his quarters at Sevenbury Place, despite all of the construction going on. There was not much money. They had to buy things in piecemeal, but still Prabhupada was going to stay in the temple and be with the devotees. Tamal Krishna arrived from Los Angeles. वो जो ऊपर से बंद कर दीजिए, नहीं घूमेगा तब, ऊपर से बंद करो. And in addition to supervising much of the construction, he began taking the devotees out daily to chant on the streets and sell Back to Godhead magazines. Jamuna was sewing curtains from morning until night. Ishan, Shamsundar, and others were working every possible hour on the renovation. And every day Prabhupada would walk through the building to see the progress. So in the last few weeks, since Prabhupada arrived in September, they had arranged 3 months of lecture programs for Prabhupada, where people were coming, the public were coming. Prabhupada would also lecture at John Lennon's estate in the chamber building that was being used as a temple, but very few outsiders came. It was just the devotees living there. But we haven't heard anywhere that Sankirtan was being taken out or that book distribution was happening. So Prabhupada wrote to Tamal Krishna, who was in charge of book distribution in Sankirtan in Los Angeles. And they were having immense success there, because in Los Angeles is Hollywood. We've all heard of Bollywood. So Bollywood is a takeoff of Hollywood, where all the cinemas and all the mega stars, they all live there, and you can meet them on the streets, and there's so many restaurants and theaters and so much social life going on. So Tamal Krishna, he was in charge of Sankirtan, and they had such an amazing success from Sankirtan. Devotees were joining day after, every day devotees were joining the Los Angeles temple as a result of Sankirtan and book distribution. So that's why Prabhupada called Tamal Krishna to come to London. Now you start Sankirtan and book distribution here. And because he was a manager and organizer, he also helped with the construction as well. With only 1 week left until the opening, you remember last week we read that although the temple was not ready, Shamsundar said it could not be ready, Prabhupada had them print the invitations for December 14th. So with only 1 week left until the opening, Shamsundar still labored on the temple ceiling. He had not even begun the altar. Again, the other devotees complained to Prabhupada that Shamsundar was too slow, but Prabhupada replied, "He wants to make it artistic. Let him do it." So we had the same experience here. The temple wasn't constructed, wasn't ready, but fortunately, because you'll notice in our temple, our altars are all made of beautifully carved marble. So fortunately, that marble was being carved in Makrana. Thakur Hari Singh, he was in charge of the construction of the altars. So all that work was not done here. It was done in Makrana in Rajasthan. And then the pieces were brought here, the workers came, and they set up the altar. But it wasn't like that in London. Shamsundar had to do everything. And he was still working on the ceiling of the temple. He hadn't even started the altar yet. Shamsundar, this time on his own, asked George Harrison for a donation for an altar. George gave 2,000 pounds, and Shamsundar picked out a slab of golden sienna marble and 2 slabs of red marble. So you can see a little bit here, the marble slabs that their lordships are standing on, and then Lord Jagannath on top, and then an offering area. So that was the marble that was donated, beautiful marble. Although Prabhupada had a pair of 17-inch carved wood deities, 17 inches like that, of Radha and Krishna, he didn't plan to use them. He wasn't going to install those Radha Krishna deities. And the size of the altar Shamsundar was building clearly required larger deities. Now, where were those deities going to come from? One day, a Mr. Dayal phoned, representing a large London Hindu society. He had heard the devotees wanted Radha Krishna deities, and he had a pair he would donate. When Prabhupada heard the news, he sent Tamal Krishna, Mukunda, and Shamsundar to Mr. Dayal's home to see the deities. Radha and Krishna were white marble and stood about 3 feet high. Never before had the devotees seen such large deities, and they offered obeisances. When they returned to the temple and told Prabhupada, he said, "Take me there at once." Srila Prabhupada, accompanied by Shamsundar, Mukunda, and Tamal Krishna, arrived by van at Mr. Doyle's home. Prabhupada entered the living room and sat down. The deities, covered by a cloth, stood on a table in the corner. Tamal Krishna was about to unveil them when Prabhupada checked him. "No, that's all right." Prabhupada sat and spoke with Mr. Doyle, asking him about his work and where he had come from in India, and he met Mr. Doyle's family. Prabhupada and his host chatted while the devotees listened. "Swamiji," Mr. Doyle said at length, "I want to show you my deities." "Yes," Prabhupada replied, "I will see them after some time." Prabhupada began to speak about his Krishna consciousness mission, and after a while, Mr. Doyle again requested, "Please take a look at these deities." And with that, he walked over and unveiled Radha and Krishna. "Oh, yes," Prabhupada said, folding his hands respectfully. Mr. Doyle said that he had ordered the deities from India for a Hindu center, but in transit, a tiny piece of Radharani's finger had chipped off. Therefore, according to Hindu tradition, the deities could not be installed. Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada said, "See how heavy these deities are." Tamal Krishna, placing one hand at Radharani's base, and the other around her shoulder, lifted her. "Not so heavy," he said. Now, here also in our temple, the Krishna Balaram temple, sometimes the deities, due to the incompetence of the devotees who are taking care of them, would damage the deities. One time, as Radha, Shamsundar, Lalita, and Vishaka were being dressed, they were putting decoration on top of the altar. Something fell right onto Lalita Devi, and from her legs, she was completely broken. And quickly, they didn't know what to do. They called a sculptor named Bhaktisiddhanta Das. He immediately took 2 rods and he put them into Lalita Devi's legs. And before the curtains opened, Lalita Devi was standing ready for darshan. So there are times like that when their lordships have been damaged, but we don't put them into visarjan out of love, because they're being worshipped and they're being cared for. We keep them on the altar. But according to Shastric rules and regulations, if the deity is not yet installed, then if there's any discrepancy, that deity cannot be installed. Therefore, Mr. Dayal offered these deities to Prabhupada because according to scripture, they were not going to be able to install the deities in their Hindu society. But Prabhupada overlooked that entirely. He understood the desire of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Shamsundar, Prabhupada said, "See how heavy is Krishna." The deities were actually heavy for one man to carry, but the devotees understood Prabhupada's intention. "Not bad," Shamsundar said, holding Krishna a few inches off the table. "Yes," Prabhupada said conclusively, "I think they're all right. Let us take them. We have our van." And suddenly Prabhupada was leaving with his disciples following, carefully carrying Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada thanked Mr. Dayal. "But Swamiji," protested Mr. Dayal, who was not prepared for this sudden exit. "Please, we will arrange to bring them. Our society will bring them." But Prabhupada was already out the door and leading his men to the van. "Please wait," Mr. Dayal persisted. "We have to fix them first. Then you can take them." "We have an expert man," Prabhupada said. "He can fix these things." Prabhupada was assuring Mr. Dayal and at the same time directing his disciples. He opened the door of the van and Shamsundar and Tamal Krishna slowly entered, cautiously setting Radha and Krishna within. Tamal Krishna knelt in the back to hold the deities secure, while Shamsundar got into the driver's seat. "Now drive," Prabhupada said. And off they went, with Prabhupada smiling from the window to Mr. Dayal and his family, who stood together on the curb. Shamsundar had driven but a few blocks when Prabhupada asked him to stop the van. Turning around in his seat, Prabhupada began offering prayers. "Govindam Adipurasham Tamaham Bhajami." He looked long at Krishna, who was white with a slight bluish cast, and at the exquisite white Radharani by his side. "Krishna is so kind," he said. "He has come like this." Then he had Shamsundar continue driving slowly back to the temple. Carefully, Prabhupada supervised his disciples carrying the deities up to the second floor. The devotees were astounded and delighted to see Prabhupada in such an animated and intense state, bringing Radha and Krishna into their temple. He had the deities placed in a curtained-off section of his own room, and then he sat at his desk. Prabhupada smiled. Krishna has played a great trick. In the Mahabharata also, he said, there are incidents where Krishna plays tricks. One such trick was Krishna's agreeing to be on the side of the general he saw first in the morning. The two opposing generals, Arjuna and Duryodhana, had both come to Krishna's tent early in the morning as Krishna slept. They had agreed that one of them would stand at Krishna's head and the other at Krishna's feet, and that they would wait until Krishna awoke. Duryodhana chose to stand by Krishna's head, while Arjuna chose his feet. Krishna awoke and saw Arjuna. That was one great trick that was played by Krishna, Prabhupada said. Similarly, this is a great trick. He told how Krishna had also tricked Mother Yashoda when she had tried to discipline Krishna. He had run away, and she had run after him, caught him, and tried to tie him with ropes. But every time she came with more rope, Prabhupada said, it was just a little too short. Krishna can play any kind of trick. Another such trick has been played. They made so much effort to bring these deities here, thinking they will be for their Hindu center. But all the time, Krishna wanted to come here. So this chip on the deity's hand is just Krishna's trick, and we have caught them. Prabhupada, Mukunda said, you kidnapped Krishna. Yes, Prabhupada said. Once I was in the bank, and the manager had some scheme, but I foiled his scheme. So he said to me, Mr. Day, you should have been a politician. Prabhupada laughed. Then he became grave and asked the devotees not to talk about the incident. Many people would not understand how he could install a chipped deity. The devotees agreed to keep the secret, but they had no doubt that Prabhupada's love for Krishna was transcendental to Hindu customs. Radha and Krishna had come to London on Prabhupada's desire. How do you dress big deities like this, Jamuna asked. They already have clothes on. Prabhupada said, you bring me some cloth. What kind of cloth, Prabhupada? What should the clothes look like? Like in the pictures, he replied. Well, there's so many different pictures, she said. Sometimes Krishna has a ruffled skirt on, and sometimes he has a dhoti on, and sometimes he has a big crown on. Krishna looks very beautiful in saffron, Prabhupada said. So you bring me some silk dhotis in yellow and saffron color. Jamuna collected 6 silk saris with silver and gold borders, and Prabhupada indicated the design he wanted and told Jamuna how to arrange the crowns. With only a few days remaining before the installation ceremony, Jamuna began working almost continuously at her sewing machine. Several times a day, Prabhupada would come to see her progress. Shamsundar had completed most of the altar, except for Lord Jagannath's altar and the canopy over Radha and Krishna's throne. Both the canopy and Lord Jagannath's altar would be supported by 4 heavy wooden columns more than 6 feet high. 2 rear columns would hold a marble slab for the Jagannath deities to stand on, and 2 front columns were now supporting Radha and Krishna's large velvet canopy. There's no canopy in this picture, and we'll hear why. The columns were big and heavy. Shamsundar called them elephant leg columns. The columns now stood in place on the altar, although Shamsundar hadn't had a chance to secure them. The day before the installation, Shamsundar collapsed upstairs in exhaustion. On opening day, many guests, Indians especially, crowded the temple, responding to flyers and advertisements. Apple Records had supplied a professional florist who had decorated the room with floral arrangements. A BBC television crew was on hand to videotape the ceremony. While the guests and most of the devotees held kirtan, Prabhupada, behind the curtained-off altar, bathed Radha and Krishna. So Prabhupada did not have a public abhishek for this installation. He was doing it privately, behind the curtains, while the devotees and guests were having kirtan in the temple room. The plan was that after the bathing ceremony, the deities would be placed on the altar and Jamuna would dress them. Once they were dressed and enthroned, the curtain would open for all the guests to behold Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Prabhupada would lecture, then everyone would feast. But because of Shamsundar's oversight, the installation almost became a disaster. Prabhupada had finished bathing the deities and they had been placed on the altar, on the marble altar, when suddenly the elephant leg columns tottered. The canopy above the deities began to collapse. Prabhupada, seeing the danger, jumped onto the altar and seized the heavy columns in a split second. With great strength, he held the two front pillars in place. "Get this out of here," he shouted. While Prabhupada's arms protected the deities, the men removed the canopy, and then two men at a time carried each of the pillars away. The deities remained unharmed. While Prabhupada was behind the curtain, rescuing Radha and Krishna, on the other side of the curtain, guests and reporters awaited the unveiling of the deities. Unaware of the mishap, the guests saw only men emerging from behind the curtain, carrying large pillars and a canopy. The BBC camera crew began filming the canopy and pillars as they appeared from behind the curtain, taking them to be part of a ceremonial procession. We know the story of the cat in the basket. There was a wedding, and to have cats at a function is very inauspicious. So the mother saw the cat, and she grabbed the cat and stuffed the cat into a basket so that the cat wouldn't be present for the ceremony. And then everyone saw her do that, and they thought that was part of the ceremony. So from then on, whenever there was a ceremony, they would make sure it would be a basket with a cat in it. So here the reporters, no one understood what had happened inside of the altar. And as the devotees were carrying out the two columns and the canopy, they thought that was part of the ceremony. A few devotees behind the curtain with Prabhupada were amazed, but there was no time now for apologies or appreciations. Jamuna addressed the deities, Prabhupada hurrying her. When at last everything was ready, Prabhupada opened the main curtain, revealing the graceful forms of Lord Krishna and Radharani to the temple full of guests. A devotee began to offer arati, while Prabhupada, wearing a saffron chadar and a garland of carnations, stood to one side, reverentially looking upon Radha and Krishna as their worshipper and protector. This was the culmination of months of effort. Actually, years of planning had preceded this auspicious occasion. 100 years before, Bhakti-yoga Thakur had hoped for the day when Krishna consciousness would come to England, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had also desired it. Now that an authentic, authorized temple of Radha and Krishna was preaching Krishna consciousness in London, it was an historic occasion for Gaudiya Vaishnavism. A long-standing order of the previous acharyas had been fulfilled. Prabhupada had sent invitations to several of his godbrothers in India. None of them had been able to come, of course, but at least they should have been pleased to learn that this dream of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's had been fulfilled. Prabhupada was 73. He had now opened 21 temples in 3 years. So that's 1965, 66, 67, 68, now it was 69. And officially, from 66 is when ISKCON started. So we went back and we found the Back to Godhead magazine from that December 1969. And you can count here. I'll try to read them for you. In Canada, they now had Vancouver and Montreal. In Japan, there was Kyoto. Prabhupada had sent Sudama and his wife Chintamani to Japan to open a temple. In the United States, in California, was Berkeley, Laguna Beach, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. In Colorado was Boulder. In Hawaii was Honolulu. Then in Massachusetts was Boston. In Missouri was St. Louis. In Ohio was Columbus. In Pennsylvania was Philadelphia. In Michigan was Detroit. In New York was Buffalo and New York City. In North Carolina was Chapel Hill. And in Washington was Seattle. There was Washington, D.C., which is the capital of the U.S. And then in West Virginia it was Moundsville. So that was 21 temples by this time, in 3 years, that Prabhupada had his disciples open. Recently, he had told some of his disciples that they should try to form a governing body for ISKCON to relieve him of the management and allow him to concentrate fully on presenting Krishna-conscious literature. This literature could be introduced all over the world into homes, schools, and colleges for the benefit of everyone. It would be in such literature that he would live on. How much time he had left in this world he didn't know, he said, but he wanted to go on serving and trying to please his Guru Maharaj life after life. So Prabhupada had already had 2 warnings by this time. One was on the Jaladuta when he had 2 heart attacks, and then in 1967 when Prabhupada had his brain stroke. So he knew, he had his warnings. He didn't know when the time would come, how much time he had, and therefore he wanted to concentrate as far as possible to carry out the personal instructions Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had given